My name is Cole. I'm an occupational therapist, and today I'm going to be talking about gender as an act of doing. So let me just share my screen over here. There we go. All right. Just to kickstart, a little bit of background on me is that, as I say, my name is Cole Goldberg. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've just submitted my PhD at UCT in psychiatry and mental health within the intellectual disability division. My PhD study is on self-advocacy and developing a self-advocacy toolkit, particularly for people with intellectual disability, but more around how does a person stand up and advocate for their needs. I started working in private practice a good couple of years ago at CGOT, Cole Goldberg Occupational Therapy. I work with the most incredible team of therapists. I honestly look at them in awe of the magic that they create. The changes that they make in people's lives are incredible, and I'm very, very, very lucky to have them on my team. Okay, so let's get down to the basics. Let me orientate you to my perspective. So what is occupation? Now, if you ask anybody, they'll tell you occupation is your work. So you're a teacher or you're a doctor or whatever it may be. But in our profession, occupation means anything that a person does that occupies time. So basically everything. We get the standard, can I help your cousin find a job? Yes, I probably could, but that's not the point. Can I help your child's poor sitting posture? Can I fix their fine motor and their pencil grip? Yes, we could probably do that too, but again, it's so much more than that. So if you think about it as basically anything that a person does that occupies time, it's basically everything, which means we are everything therapists. In occupational therapy, we look at engagement, activity, participation. We're in the business of potential, empowering independence and fostering grit. We support a person by looking at them as a whole. Someone who needs meaning and purpose, a human being who desires to fit in, to be an active member of society. So yes, when you are 5 or 6 years old, some of the most important things that you can engage in are learning about how to hold your pencil. And at that point, it's really, really important. A lot of OTs flocked into the pediatric arena because, let's be honest, kids can be cute. So essentially in our practice, we're looking at goals and function. So what are the goals that you have for yourself? What barriers are in place that stop you from achieving them? How do we break down the activity? What enablers are there? And what is the context that's kind of providing the space for you to be able to do this or for you not to be able to? So what OTs do is we're trained in this kind of activity analysis, right? That's what we call it. And what it means is it's a tool that we use where we look at something as simple, for example, as buying deodorant, and then all of the tiny things a person would need to be able to do in order to perform this occupation. So let me illustrate this with this particular example. In order for a person to walk into a shop and purchase deodorant, they need to have the physical strength and mobility to do so. They need to be able to stand upright. They need to have muscle strength, range of motion. They need to be able to hold themselves up against gravity so they don't collapse into a puddle on the floor. They need to be able to engage with a cashier. They need to be emotionally regulated. They need to have money to spend. They need to make their way to the store. Maybe they took an Uber if they can't drive, or maybe they had to ask their parents for a lift. They may have to ask for help if they can't find the brand of deodorant that they like when they're at the shops. They may have to count their change if they carried cash. Each of these subtasks requires skills, and we as OTs call these performance components. So you can see on my slide there, I've got physical, emotional, mental, cognitive, social, and environmental. So what OTs do is we break down the tasks, the goals, into these different areas and say, let's look at the barriers and enablers, and how do we optimize function? Pretty complex, right? So how can gender be an action of doing? It's complicated to start. A lot of therapists prefer to steer clear because it is tricky. It certainly was not a module that was covered in my undergrad or my master's or my PhD, come to think of it. It simply was just not addressed. In prepping for this talk, I decided to consult with the literature and double check that what I think is true is in fact true. And, I found this really beautiful scoping review, which said that the scarcity of knowledge for occupational therapists on gender identity is so prominent. And I think it's important for us to consider that this is not something that we come across regularly in our training, but it is something that is absolutely a part of a person's identity and something that we need to become familiar with. So there's not a lot of OTs who have learned about this. So let's go on. If gender is performative, right? What you do to affirm your gender, the way you cut your hair, the clothes you wear, the body you sculpt, the choices you make. You can see that these kinds of actions of doing are quite clear occupations. So there was a study done by Kimmelstein in 2019 where they highlighted how OT has the distinct value of analyzing a person's occupational performance and providing adaptations that can aid in the individual's ability to perform their occupations, including those of gender constitution. So, according to this definition, what OT can do is help establish and adapt new ways to express gender and adapt current ways of interacting with their gender within their contexts. So, occupational justice. This we definitely covered in our studies many times, but in different facets of identity. According to the OT practice framework that was done in 2014, occupational justice is defined as a justice that recognizes occupational rights to inclusive participation in everyday occupations for all persons in society, regardless of age, ability, gender, social class, or other differences. Now, if we reflect on the work that we do, the places that we engage in and with our clients or patients, I think it's quite clear that the trans and gender diverse community experience a great deal of occupational injustice. When people are unable to engage in the occupations due to their gender that they want to engage in, they experience occupational injustice, which can actually negatively affect their health and well-being. We think about alienation, we think about imbalance. These are some of the OT terms, but quite practically, we think about people who are trying to participate in things that would affirm their identity, but they just simply can't. Okay, so our next slide here is a framework that we often use in OT, which is called doing, being, becoming, and belonging. So considering this occupational therapy lens, which I've now shared with you about everything that we do that brings us meaning and purpose as an action of an occupation. If we think about gender, gender is something that you can do. It's something that we can be and become and belong. And everybody wants to land up at a point of belonging. What I'm going to do now is give you some case studies of clients that we've worked with in our practice and how we've supported them from an OT way. So, while in our practice, we do work with neurotypical folk, we also largely work with the neurodiverse population. We've worked with clients where their goals are around dating, intimacy, and making meaningful connections. We've supported them in preparing for dates, coming up with questions to ask should it get awkward, deciding what to wear, deciding where to go, etc., but supporting them in making these choices. We've worked with clients where their goals are around getting a job at a local bookstore. We supported a neurodiverse trans varsity student to support themselves financially. Part of this included the supported employment OT, helping them prepare a CV, interview role play, connecting with the potential employer, setting up an email address, and advocating for the needs of her patient. Some of our work is about finding stability in tumultuous times, finding ways to recharge the energy battery and not burn out where the demands of life become too much. Or even finding constructive ways to discuss gender identity or sexuality with some old school parents. Maybe the person wants to learn how to build a more masculine body. What gym exercises should they be doing? Maybe someone wants to buy their first perfume, but they don't want to go alone. So we set up a scorecard with different perfume types and rating levels. And we accompany our clients to the shopping center to make the choice. Sometimes it's about holding space and allowing the person to be their true, authentic self. And sometimes our goals have nothing to do with gender, where gender is just merely a facet of a person's identity, but what is more concerning are their low school marks. Therefore, an executive functioning boot camp is in order. Sometimes we need to do sensory profiles, home-based contextual support. We cover a lot. We certainly don't know it all, but we really do try to help. And most importantly for us is the attitude of radical acceptance. For us, it's the most important thing that the person who is sitting in front of us can identify their goals. Maybe those goals are about doing gender in a certain way, becoming part of the gender identity that they're looking for, belonging, all of those kinds of things. Maybe that is their goal, but maybe their goal is also about feeling comfortable going to university and feel congruent with who they are. Maybe their goal is around having a really meaningful dinner with their parents. So essentially what we do is we hold the space, we make the choices with our clients, we support them in finding avenues and strategies so that they feel like they can cope. A lot of that, we joke about having OTs with a big toolbox, but we do, and we put into place a lot of different kinds of tools and strategies and advice, but more than anything else, it's about empowering our patients so that they can do things on their own.
My shadow is purple. My dad has a shadow that's blue as a berry, and my mom's is as pink as a blossoming cherry. There's only those choices, a 2 or a 1, but mine is quite different. It's both, and it's none. If theirs are straight, then mine is a circle, for my shadow's different. My shadow is purple. My shadow loves playing with all sorts of toys, things loved by girls and things loved by boys. I dance with the pinks as they turn and they spin, and play sport with the blues as they lose and they win. Some of my friends think I'm simply confused, but the thing I love most is not having to choose. Some tell me I'm blue, only blue can be strong, but my mom's strong too, so I think they're wrong. Some tell me I'm pink, 'cause pink's the most caring, but dad's always crying and loving and sharing. Why can't I love sport and dancing and trains and ponies and glitter and engines and planes? Why must I choose and exclude all the rest? I love choosing both because both is the best. And now it is time for the greatest event. The school dance is here. The invite's been sent. I'm ready to rock and I'm feeling cute. My mom made my skirt and my dad made my suit. I bounce through the door and gasp as I enter. The room's split in two, right down the center. Blue shadows go left and pink shadows right. Once we're split up, we'll kickstart this night. Everyone laughs as they head to their zones, and right in the middle, I'm left all alone. I look to the left where the shadows are blue. They wave me over saying, "You are blue too." Then I look to the right as I struggle to think. They call me over, "Come on, you are pink." The teacher walks up looking rather amused. "I know you are different, but now you must choose." My heart just starts racing and tears fill my eyes. I know I must choose, but don't understand why. The room has gone quiet and everyone's looking. My cheeks are so red they feel like they're cooking. If I cannot be purple, then I cannot stay. I'll leave and go home, I quietly say. I slowly start walking. My legs are like jello. A voice breaks the silence. My shadow is yellow. My eyes open wide. My shadow it gawks. A child walks to the middle, looks up and talks. There's more than two colors our shadows can be. I was too scared before, but blue is not me. I know from outside blue fits like a glove, but my shadow's yellow, which to me feels like love. They turn with a smile and take hold of my hand. Who wants to join us? There's room here to stand. At first no one moves, then a hand's in the air. My shadow's as brown as a big grizzly bear. My shadow is red, mine's silver, mine's green. Mine's violet, mine's orange, mine's aquamarine. They all rush to join us, whatever their color. Blue, pink, and purple, and shadows called other. I look at each shadow, no two are the same. On each happy face, there's no trace of shame. Each different and special and fully unique. No color stronger, and no colors weak. The teacher comes over as we're joined as one. Whatever your color, start dancing. Have fun.
Okay, folks, so because I'm an OT and we are like this and extra and impossible, I've made this cute little animation to kind of summarize how the OT role works when it comes to gender. So you may be wondering, thanks Cole for all this information, but kind of what comes next? So to start, we have already established that OTs have a lot of different tools in our toolboxes. But before we can start intervention, it's very important that we start with an assessment to kind of figure out what are we working with? What does the adaptive functioning look like? What's going on with this person and this person as a holistic being? How do we put these pieces of the puzzle together? We're looking at a human being in front of us, a person who has self-care, who has productivity, leisure. What do they do? What are the areas of difficulty? So once the assessment is done, we sit together with our clients and we establish some goals. I'd like to think that you can all catch on to my little metaphor of the goalie over here. But okay, let's move on. Once we have our goals, we smash them. Not every time. We certainly try, but sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes doing this kind of work doesn't yield fast results. You know, today alone, I was working at the practice with a trans teen who was so desperately devastated when they called the endocrinologist's office and found out that the next available appointment is in September. It's a long road. We spoke it through, but the tears and the trauma and the waiting is hard. Part of OT is about leisure exploration. It's about finding things that spark joy for us. It's about helping our clients go to the places that are difficult, set it up, plan. So maybe it is the barber. Maybe it's about going for a masculine haircut at a place where you feel validated. Conversely, maybe you're going to the salon and maybe the therapist actually comes with you. Or maybe we help you design some kind of Pinterest board of what you want your hair to look like so that you can show the hairdresser. In terms of fashion, maybe you want to become a fashion designer, or maybe you're just really struggling to go into the shop and buy fashion that is different from your assigned gender at birth. OTs help our clients think of ideas. We talk, we play, we engage, we come up with a plan where the client is starting to feel a good sense of self-worth and starting to feel stronger in their gender identity. You know, on the topic of strong, sometimes it's about helping our clients figure out what they want to be doing in the gym to build the body that they want. It's all about connecting, figuring out exactly how do we support the person to live their best life. This is signifying a high five between the therapist and the client. We also connect with the MDT and we work collaboratively to support our clients, whether it's about their medication, whether it's about their health, whether it's about connecting with the school. We support our clients. Maybe, for example, they want to learn how to use public transport because they don't have the best relationship with their parents, but they do want to come to therapy. We have a number of clients who we're working with in the gender diverse community who have a passion for animals, and maybe it's about connecting them with like-minded teens who can volunteer at animal shelters. More often than not, people are just so incredibly frustrated because they feel so stuck. So, you know, a part of what we're trying to do here is paint a picture of unstuckness, where we can be working with these clients to see the bigger, broader picture. This image is of a mom and her daughter smiling, and part of our role as well is about kind of connecting with families, supporting them in their home context, just really making their life a little bit easier, if that makes sense. It's complicated and we need strategy, but what we need to be doing, and I often say it to my patients, is that we're working with you as a teammate in your development, in your kind of life that you want to be creating. We want to help you live the life that you want and be happy at the end of it all. That's all we really want, is happy clients. So to conclude, we have this really cool toolbox filled with resources and ideas and strategies that as OTs we've learned. But a big part of what we need to be doing is advocating on a broader level, not just the individualized patient care. So, all in all, it's a complicated galaxy. Therapy is difficult and messy and it's hard, but essentially the important thing that I would like you all to take home is that gender is something that you can do, but we often need support and scaffolding in figuring that out. And we often need some kinds of guidance in terms of how do we do the gender that we want to be doing, or that feels good for us? How do we make ourselves unstuck and feeling good about ourselves? I think it's hard because it's less tangible and less quantitative than a lot of people are used to. Because how do we measure self-esteem? How do we measure that you are experiencing success? For me, it's about getting the results from the family, from the school, from the friends to say, I can't believe it, but this person is just in such a better space. A patient of mine got up yesterday and went through to the gym on their own. And I couldn't be prouder, because it was such an incredible task. And if we think about things like, for example, spoon theory or energy banks and batteries, a lot of the time in this population, we're working with people who already feel so drained. They feel so despondent, they feel so frustrated. So it takes so many more spoons, so much more energy and capacity in order to do everyday life tasks like going to school or returning to school post-COVID. It's hard. So when we find the kind of tools to get through that messy middle bit over the hill to the other side, it's really encouraging to watch the progress that our clients make. It's lovely to work in multidisciplinary teams where we have the support of the people around us. But yeah, I guess that for me is, in summary, how we as OTs work with gender as an act of doing. Okay, guys, that's my presentation.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions. Are you happy to field them? I wonder who wants to go first.
Absolutely not a problem.
There's some comments in the chat. Oh, Ron, raise the hand.
So guys, hi. First, just excuse my voice, and if I do cough, just bear with me. But Cole, just firstly, thank you so much for your presentation tonight. And actually, the first part of, or the first reaction for me was, you kind of really took me back to when I also, because I think you're very much a pioneer in my sense of it, as a OT in the arena of gender affirming work. And when I started this work about 20 years ago, we created this team at 2 Military Hospital with the very first ever trans woman I worked with. The OT was an integral part of the team then. And I remember that for her, exactly what you were describing now was, I mean, she, she did the work with kind of going to the mall, with the client, and they curated a number of experiences that this young, blossoming trans woman needed. That, the role of the OT was to kind of almost be this support ego person, and to, but what I really like about what OT does is that what you do is so practical and applied. Anyway, so, and it just struck me that, I remember us doing that work there, and I haven't heard or seen a lot more since then. And I guess my one question is, what do you think has been the challenge for OT as a profession, that it isn't more common and out there that OTs are, as a norm, part of the teams that are working, with trans and gender diverse persons? And then so that's the one question. And the second is, so much of the work, I work obviously psychotherapeutically, and one of the elements that often came out with my trans male and trans female clients was this kind of this need to almost like become the alpha male or the alpha female, to kind of achieve almost this kind of heightened state of feminine and masculine, and then that will mean I am, authentic and real. And so much of my work therapeutically was helping the person understand, but you need to become the woman or the guy that you are. And I just think that OTs, would so more profoundly, in an applied way, be able to step in that point of a transgender person's journey, as to, so how do I become authentically me in my expression of who I am, and even if, as a non-binary person as well. But yeah, so you've reminded me, you've inspired me, and some of your thoughts.
Thanks so much, Ron. To start with your first one, why aren't OTs doing this, or why is it so scarce in the literature? Why isn't it happening? I can't say for sure, but I can say what my perceptions are. And I guess the fact that this wasn't covered at all in our undergrad, I mean, as like you would think that when we're doing identity politics and we're doing role performance and the other OT concepts, you would think we would unpack gender a little bit, but we didn't. We unpacked, particularly in our South African context, race, disability, and a lot of other facets of identity. I think the queer representation in particularly, you know, the OT departments that I've come across is minimal. And when there isn't that representation, I don't think it becomes a priority. So what we've landed up having is we've had several, you know, other facets of identity which are prominent in the division, which therefore become important for us to study and understand, which is why we do occupational justice. In terms of once we leave the university, it's something that's unfamiliar unless you are part of the queer community. So it leaves you in a position where it's so tricky. But when I talk to my colleagues who aren't in this area, they're nervous to mess up. They're nervous that they don't understand the dynamics. They're nervous because they don't have the lived experience. But because people are nervous, they choose something safe like pediatrics, or they choose splinting or dementia, or something where there are really clear handling principles and OT strategies, but there doesn't seem to be that in the gender space. I hope that answers that question, Ron.
Thanks. No, absolutely. Thanks, Cole.
And then your second question is about kind of being the most authentic version of yourself. And I think that that is so key in our practice, which is not only exploration into the doing of gender, but the doing of you, like who are you and what makes you happy and what fills your tank, and kind of just unpacking the things that make you you. And I think so much in the gender space is around trying hard to be what you want people to think you are, but there's so much room for being so special and incredible as you are. That sounds so corny, everybody, but you guys know what I mean, is essentially in our sessions when we get people who come in feeling profoundly depressed and alone and anxious to play a game and laugh and enjoy something and feel good about liking something that other people don't like or that's not trendy. All of a sudden we start seeing people whose self-esteem improves because they're valid in who they are, and gender is an aspect of their identity. So they don't need to be that alpha male character because they're male enough, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Cole. No, absolutely on the spot. That because often for a lot of the trans clients that I've worked with, when they're kind of beginning their journey, as we know for a long time, what they have been experiencing has been within themselves, within their inner world. And that beginning first initial steps into figuring out, when it comes to full expression of, my internal subjective sense of my gender, is this tripping up, and you only have what's mirrored around you, and what is mirrored, and then what is mirrored around you, what is kind of held to high value when it comes to be, say, femme and masculine. And then exactly that, but then the figuring out, but yes, I'm femme, but I don't always want to be wearing frilly clothes or exceptional amounts of makeup, that I can still feel femme in my denim jeans and t-shirt, whatever. And I really do think that OT is one of the ideal professions that steps into that space and understands it and can break it down into its real applied elements in a way that can be such profound space and process for facilitating, I guess, the transition journey of trans and gender diverse persons. Thanks.
Ron, there was one example that I've used in therapy, which is we journaled some kind of thing, and it was journal and bring to therapy the moments that feel most you, or the days where your outfit makes you feel the happiest. And it was something that I saw online. I think I saw it on TikTok while scrolling, and it was just an idea for people to feel authentic. And somebody would come in and say, I felt really good when I wore my Doc Marten boots, or actually I wore this and didn't feel great. And it kind of starts getting the person to have a picture of what they want to be. And I think you're right. OT is well positioned to figure that out, because we'll do that dirty work of teasing out the hard parts. We'll make the Pinterest boards, we'll set up the timers to help you be on time for university, we'll do all of the life stuff quite practically and functionally. That's my answer there. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Thanks, Cole. My questions / comments, I think, are reasonably philosophical. And thank you for your presentation, because it kind of like the fireworks going off in my head, because I was thinking about gender as doing, and I was playing in my head with the idea of gender as being as well, because in my own life, I've experienced quite regularly in shopping areas, like at a Checkers, being misgendered when I'm literally just standing. I'm wearing this shirt, for example, and this hair and this beard, and the person peripherally sees me and reads something energetic from me that is beyond almost what I'm doing. So I'm sort of fascinated by gender also is about what is in people's heads, about the expectations of what gender should look like when they see it in front of them or in the corner of their eye. And so I think I'm doing masculinity, but something else is going on that is beyond me and beyond the person. It sort of lies somewhere in between us. And then the second thought was around the idea of radical acceptance, I think was a phrase that you used. And I'm picking up a little bit on Ron's comments. I work at a university where I find a subset of women do a kind of gender performance, which I find is a kind of hyper-femininity, which has evolved out of a very patriarchal system, where that form of femininity is, in a sense, a defense or a strategy, a survival strategy in the realm and the space of hyper-masculinity. So that the expression of that femininity is often with a very high-pitched, sing-songy voice, the clothing presentation, the kind of laughing when you said something that is slightly controversial, that minimizes the space that you take up, and that you're working very hard not to offend or upset anybody, particularly a man. And so it goes to the question of authenticity. So is that an authentic self that they're expressing? Who gets to decide what is authentic? If the broader patriarchal system in effect creates those kinds of gender performances as a survival strategy. So I'm also toying with the idea of gender as a series of doings that can be context dependent. In my own life and energy, I can feel my gender performance adapting depending on the context I'm in. So yesterday, for example, I ran a workshop at our veterinary science faculty, which was quite conservative, and I could feel the way that I just held my body was different. So I'm not sure if there's a question in there, Cole, but those are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
I think you touch on something which is so important for me, which is the broader systemic perceptions, not only the inside of the therapeutic room perceptions. So for me, what I mean when I speak about radical acceptance is, I have a kid or a teen who comes in and sits down, and you can see that they are so nervous to be themselves in that space. And they'll start and say, I'm on the autism spectrum and I'm trans. And I say, I know that, but what do you watch on Netflix? And it's about, then we break down whatever the performance is into, what are you watching? What do you have for breakfast? And it becomes very real and practical. So that for me is the work done in the room. I think the work done out the room is huge. And that's systemic, right? And that, as you say, is a philosophical thing, because how do we change systems about gender? As an OT, there's so few of us working even in the individual capacity in terms of gender identity, that to think about my, varsity class getting together and causing systemic change around OT, occupational justice, and gender, I can't see it happening because so few people are in this arena. Definitely something that we need, definitely something that we need to be considering, and certainly something that we should be learning. So that's my 2 cents on that.
That's lovely. I mean, I suppose this is for all people working therapeutically with clients, is that you're sort of juggling a whole lot of balls at the same time, sort of, completely validating the person's story and experience and identity, but holding in your head that there's a bigger system which they themselves may reach a point of understanding of and maybe change aspects about how they want to be in the world. And so it's about holding all of those non-judgmentally and not imposing it on the person.
Absolutely.
Which is hard, because I think we all have sort of those scripts inside us, which we almost unconsciously act out.
And that's why it's so much easier to do pencil grips in pediatrics, right? Much easier, because it's clear, and there's a rhythm that you follow. You know what I mean? There's rules around it for therapists. It's easy. You work proximal to distal. If you don't have core stability, you don't have finger stability. But in gender, it's so much more subtle and complex than just that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Simon.
Yeah, I'm not sure you'll really see me. There's any point of me putting that on. But I just want to say, particularly with young people, in some ways, I find it's a bit like everything else, that the patient will tell you what they need. And I find it fascinating how, well, about 80% of the transgender young people I see are also on the autism spectrum. And many of them do need very basic help in terms of understanding and things like clothing. I've also had adults who've wanted to see me to go shopping with me. And but with the young people, I also think they've got an incredible ability, these autistic young people that I'm seeing in particular, to understand the concepts we're talking about. When they're in a room talking about this together in the teen group, they talk about the fact that until they fully pass as perhaps male or female, they do have to work harder to try and fit the stereotypes of how they dress. But actually, they can't wait to get to a point where they fully pass as male or female. So then they can wear lipstick and jewelry if they're a guy, and a dress just to freak everybody out. And so I think, you know, many transgender people, particularly on the spectrum, and young people, these are issues they do engage with. And really it's about understanding where the young person is and what exactly they want help with. And I know Cole and her team does an excellent job at getting that quite quickly. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Simon. Always good to have a good review. And yeah, we are quite proud of our results, because as a functional team, we're looking at functional outcomes. So yes, I mean, I can't even begin to put myself in the position of psychology, because the process is so much more abstract and concrete, and OT so much more concrete. So it's far easier, I would think, from our perspective to get things done. But yes, Simon, I am quite chuffed with how our team get results in a short space of time. So thank you for that. That's very nice.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. It might be unrelated.
Go for
I have
it.
a question about OT, or the role of OT when it comes to severe genital dysphoria, where the genital functions, the sexual functions cause extreme distress for the individual, and how OT could possibly help with that.
So again, also a great question. Not an area that we've learned about, but I think if we have the attitude of something that is willing to learn, certainly something we can do. From my end, you know, we deal quite a lot with that, but more on a kind of cognitive emotional level. And, you know, obviously there's all of these kinds of contraptions that people can use, and we could support our clients in making those choices. But essentially the physical health implications, I don't know enough about to comment on. And to be honest with you, I don't know if there are any OTs who do that kind of work. I don't think that they are. We normally refer to the medical fraternity when it comes to the actual kind of changing of the body. But when it comes to the more softer skills stuff, that we take on for sure.
Thank you so much. I was just wondering, like, if there were any, like, aside from the medical, obviously, like, I'm trying to take care of the medical side of things, but I don't know what you mean by contraptions, but
like I know that people, for example, can, people put in assistive devices, people use a whole bunch of different things to affirm who they are, you know. But from our end, the sexual dysfunction or the genital dysphoria, that would need to be resolved in a medical way, right? So if they wanted to have bottom surgery, I don't even know if our report would count. For us, it would be about more around exactly from this talk, the role performance, gender as doing, less about the actual mechanisms of the body. That's, I think, beyond our scope. I speak under correction. It's certainly, as I say, this is something that's never been done in my experience and certainly not covered in my studies.
Okay. I'm just thinking about a particular client of mine who is asexual and extremely sex averse as well, on top of being trans. So they want no sexual function whatsoever. So I was just seeing if, you know, how we could help there. I did refer them to OT for because they're also on the spectrum and have sensory issues. But I was just curious whether we could somehow, help them with the distress around the function that they don't want.
Absolutely. So that phrasing of the question makes a lot more sense to me, in that what we can do there is better understand the activity of, for example, sexual intimacy. So from a sensory perspective, we know that there's a lot of people who are neurodiverse or gender diverse who experience dysphoria around the sensory input required with some kind of intimate act. So for us, a lot of that is about kind of talking to the partner and saying, these are the things that I feel okay with and these are the things that I don't. But first is exploring which stuff do you feel okay with and which stuff don't you? You know, that's just poor English, but you know what I mean. So for us, we need to understand a lot of our clients struggle with any kind of physical touch. So what we would do then is a sensory profile and better understand, maybe the person is really tactile avoiding but proprioceptive seeking. So maybe there are ways to connect with them on an intimate way that aren't the sexual acts that the person finds discomfort in. So it's about adapting the activity of intimacy, the expectations placed from partners, so that the person feels that they don't feel guilty or they don't feel shamed or they don't feel unhappy about intimacy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Cole,
Jonathan.
thank you very much for the informative talk. I think Simon already mentioned neurodiversity, but I think just to be curious around kind of typical things you'd help autistic clients with. I know there's probably quite a range of things, but then it's always good to have ideas of possible ways of assisting.
Sure. So anybody neurodiverse, or is it no, go ahead.
Any form of neurodiversity, but particularly thinking about kind of autistic clients and possibly kind of trans and autistic clients. Yeah.
Okay. So the important thing about OT is that we can address any area of function or dysfunction, right? So if you've got a client who is struggling with, you know, they're in first year varsity, they're struggling to get their work done on time, they're struggling to go into class because of their gender dysphoria, they've made accommodations to try and work from home, but the work's not getting done. So OT steps in to address what the area of dysfunction is and put in supports and adaptations to create function, right? So with our neurodiverse clients, our autistic and trans clients, the work is so much broader than just that facet of identity. It's about where are you in your life and what do you need? So if we have a person, I mean, because we have like so many patients in my head, I can't bring one to mind, but the idea is somebody would come in and say, you know, I'm really struggling. Today I had a client come in for an assessment who's heading into grade 10. The pressure's now on, they're neurodiverse and they're struggling under the weight and the demands placed on them with the increase of school load. So they need help structuring their life, managing their emotions, managing their energy battery to make sure that they're okay enough to push through to matric. So the one thing that Simon did allude to, which I didn't actually talk about in this space, but maybe I can just quickly bring it up, is we found a lot of our neurodiverse kids and teens are really struggling in the school system post-COVID. So the one hat that I wear is the chief OT at CGOT, and the other hat that I wear is the co-founder of Lighthouse Learning Hub. What that is it's a co-working space for kids, because we've taken all the demands and the hectic sit in the line, wear those uncomfortable shoes out of school. Kids come on their own educational programs like Cambridge, UCT Online, whatever it may be. They get group OT, but it's about changing the demands placed on the kids. So I certainly do believe that the school system is for some, but it's definitely not for all. So better understanding the person, their needs, their wants, and what is required of them, breaking that down right across the board. So it really can be any area. Does that make sense?
Sure, it's good to know. And it's a very open-ended question. I'd be keen to hear more about your social skills groups. I know you and Elliot have been doing some amazing work and like really kind of thinking about things quite differently with Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So I'd be curious. I'm sure there's other colleagues that appreciate hearing about that as well.
Sure. So I met Elliot through a friend, and we spoke about how we would love to do some work together, and we set up a gender diverse, neurodiverse group for teens in the evenings. We had an open-ended board game activity idea. So we put all these board games out, and the kids started connecting. When I say kids, they're like 16 to 18, and they started chatting with each other, and the theme of Dungeons and Dragons came up. So Elliot and I scurried home, did all of our research about role player games and the therapeutic implications. And then we thought, all right, let's do this thing. So we had one of our teens be the dungeon master, and she would tell the most unbelievable, intricate story. To be honest, it didn't feel like a therapeutic group I didn't feel like I was working at all. I had the most fun. I have like 6 sets of dice now. It was such an awesome experience. The kind of self-esteem benefits for the dungeon master, the kids who were so shy and nonverbal being able to play as their character and do things outside of their norm was unbelievable to watch. So I know Elliot's going to be doing another round now. So he's actually going to be working with one of our colleagues, Sam, who's also an OT, he's a male OT. He happens to be my brother. Read into that what you will. But Sam and Elliot are going to be running the next group. I think they're starting next week. It's really cool.
Makes a lot of sense. And thank you very much for sharing it. There's much to learn. And yeah, it really helps to think about this multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
Any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, then it's been wonderful. Thank you, Cole. I think we've all learned so much.
Thank you so much for having me.